So it is 10 o'clock Mountain Time in the Mile High City, Denver, Colorado. My name is John Wren, and this is the Startup Show. We're here each Friday morning to talk about how to start in a new direction, starting a new business, project, a new campaign, or a new career. And each Friday afternoon at 2 p.m., we can meet with you live face-to-face at Panera Bread Cafe. It's the 13th and Grant, just a block from the state capitol. The Startup Show is sponsored by the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc. We cooperate with local chambers to try to provide more real help to startups and very small businesses. We feel like the SBA has done a lot of harm with their approach, which has just really kind of filled all available time, this approach of market research and careful strategic planning. It's just simply not the way businesses actually start. So we offer an alternative with our very simple Idea Cafe Startup Workshops. We've been doing them for over 20 years now. 5280 Magazine says we've infused Denver with an entrepreneurial spirit, and I like to think we played some part in that. Now, Denver is a pretty entrepreneurial place, all kinds of things starting. They just opened a new government building downtown where it's supposed to be, the place to go if you're starting a new business. We'll see how that works. I'm going to go down there and visit and give you a report maybe next week or two. It might not be next week, but I'm soon going to go in and be the mystery shopper. Might have some other people going down there too to just see how they are treated. If you've got a question for us, you can send it on Twitter while we're live or when we're not live. Idea Cafe, at Idea Cafe. That Twitter is for the Small Business Chamber of Commerce. And I've got streaming those in. Let's see, here's one question. It says, what are you going to talk about on today's show? Well, we're going to talk about the history of the Idea Cafe. Why Idea? Where did that term come from? IDEA. It's a four-phase business creativity model, an acronym. I'm going to tell you where that came from. And also the Franklin Circle. How did that transpire? And how did those become the foundation for the Small Business Chamber of Commerce? At the end of the show, we're going to have an announcement about what's next, a pretty big announcement of what we are going to do now to take this to the neighborhoods, hyper-local. One way of thinking about it, hyper-local chambers of commerce. Wouldn't it be great if we had 3,000 neighborhood chambers of commerce or colleges? Maybe it's more, 3,000 neighborhood colleges across the state of Colorado to help neighbors with various types of education. In our world today, lifelong learning is absolutely mandatory. There's no way around that. But school is optional. And there are a lot of autodidacts who just get after it. And they go out and learn on their own. But most of us do better if we're part of some sort of a small self-directed learning group. And I learned about those at Regis University. I studied with someone who had studied with Malcolm Knowles, who was the godfather of modern adult self-directed learning. I learned about him through Training Magazine, and I still read Training Magazine. It's got a lot in it, but not as much as I'd like to see about self-directed learning. They had a real advocate for self-directed learning, and professional teachers, people that sell what they know, are a little bit leery of self-directed learning, and we might have a chance to talk about that more at the very end of the show, or we'll be talking about it next week. So that's what we've got on deck today, the Idea Cafe, the Franklin Circle. What's next? So let's get started. And the first item of business is the history of the Idea Cafe. I was helping do the marketing for the Bell telephone system with Mountain Bell. I was hired to be on the staff to try to develop programs that drove up business telephone bills. And we would do telephone sales training, and we'd go out and consult with companies and try to help them shift from sending salesmen out into the field to getting the sales job accomplished over the telephone. And while I was with the Bell system, we came up with a new term that got away from what that function was always called, telephone sales, which at that time was the most hated phrase in the English language. Might still be telephone sales, that call we all hate to get at home. Even with the no call law, we still get them, and it's irritating, interruptive, and it works. It's a powerful technique. And one of the reasons I think it got outlawed is it was the one way that a very small business could be on an absolute even playing field with the largest company. Maybe even having a bit of an advantage, because if I'm selling, it's my business, I get on the phone and I call, I can do a much better job than somebody just cold calling that has no connection with my company. Or if I hire someone and train them and supervise them closely, that can become a call that's the next best thing to getting a telephone call from the owner. Well, call centers really rarely have that kind of a quality to them. And big companies, it's more like air pollution than anything else. If it's a small company, they can only do so much damage. But when a very large company really cranks it up, as we were encouraging them to do with the Bell system, we had the first 800 call center in Kansas City. We got Procter & Gamble to put the 800 number on their package. That was the first package with an 800 number. That seems like nothing today, but that was a very unique idea back then, to put a phone number on a package where people could call you for free. Seemed like taking a giant risk. And what happened is companies that did it developed a much closer relationship with their customer, and sales increased. And if they just stuck to the incoming calls, things would have been great. But the problem is, and I was part of this, I had a telemarketing agency, and we had all sorts of customers, from Citibank to Montgomery Wards to you name it. We did telephone sales campaigns, cold calling customers in the evening, and in the daytime, calling businesses to set appointments for outside salespeople. It's what we specialize in. Call it Wren marketing. And one of the ways I promoted my consulting service was to get on the air with a TV show that became a radio show. For about 6 months, had a weekly John Wren's TV journal. And after 6 months of getting dressed up, going down to the station, it was very hard work. It became a radio program where you don't have to dress up. And, or at least I thought I had to dress up. The station kind of was, and the station really dropped the ball. The TV station that I was on, my deal with them was that every week I would bring a business person into the studio to tell their story. And then they could follow up after they'd been on the program. Here's this video of them on my show, and it should be a sales opportunity. And after about 6 months, it became clear that not only was the audience for my show small, but they weren't creating any sales with these business customers I was bringing in. And it just didn't work out. So it went to the radio. And but back then is when I started the idea, what we now call the Idea Cafe. Back then it was the Idea Association. And people would be on my show, tell their startup story, and then come be with us face to face. And what I learned back then was that there were two startup stories. There's a story that is told on the air, which talks about careful market research, really knowing who you're doing business with, writing a careful plan. And then there's the real story. The guy almost always, a woman would come in and say, well, now let me tell you what really happened. I mean, this was just a stroke of luck. And most successful businesses do not start with the accoutrements that the SBA has been preaching since 1953. And their message has spread, and what's done to small business in America, it's just about killed it. Dr. Amar Bahidi has written this book based on his research, very extensive research, The Origin and Evolution of New Businesses, still in print. You can still get it at Amazon and other bookstores. And I discovered Dr. Bahidi one day when I was doing this idea association meeting. I'd had the guy on the, sure enough, everybody I was talking with told pretty much the same story, is that, no, I didn't start the way I was supposed to start. Let me tell you what really happened. You know, they'd get a customer and then they'd tidy up and go forward. It was a messy process. And one day I decided, and this was back before the internet. This was when there was bulletin boards. And we had the first business bulletin board, I think, in at least in Colorado. It was through the University of Colorado Health Science Center, had Denver Freenet. They were interested in getting medical information out to small communities using the internet, and had this bulletin board system set up. And we had a bulletin board on there for the little idea association. And somebody, I had this insight, you know, I don't know if this is helping people or not. Am I really saying something that's actually true and helpful? And I thought, if I can't find one shred of theoretical underpinning for what I'm saying, I think maybe I better bow out. This was about 20 years ago. And so I got on the bulletin boards and surfed around the way you used to back then, and was able to locate what for back then was an astonishing thing. It was an article that was in the current issue of Harvard Business Review, How Successful Entrepreneurs Craft Their Strategies, by Dr. Amar Bahidi. And this is back when having an index of magazines, you usually had to wait for it to be indexed, printed, you know, maybe 6 months to a year later, you get an index. But here it is right now. I thought I could drive over to Newsland and buy a copy of that right now. So I did. And that's back when that was a brand new thing to be doing. And I read the article, and what Dr. Bahidi talked about in the article was pretty much the exact same thing I was talking about in the Idea Association meetings and on this TV and radio show, is that successful businesses just do not start the way that the SBA says that they should start. Now, in some ways, this is getting a little bit better, but it's also gotten a lot worse. You know, the Kaufman people in Kansas City, perhaps with good motives, I'm not sure, are trying to propagate the faith. Now, I think they are softening somewhat because they can see the disastrous impact of what they're doing. They're just killing startups. And as a result of startups going away, the number of businesses with 10 to 100 employees are dropping like a rock. And we're in danger in this country of becoming just this sort of like Batman, that Batman movie when they go to Gotham and it's really turned, you know, to being this shadowy thing that nobody wants to live in, you know, because the little business person has an independence that I believe is vital to the survival of our way of governing ourselves. A very successful Republican ran for office, lost, and he told me, you know, the reason I lost, I need to have some sort of a base, even if it's just a little print shop, where I can continue earning money when I get away and am serving as a legislator. And very few corporations will give that kind of freedom to an employee. So we end up with lawyers. They're pretty much independent, even if they're with a firm. They can get away, and it fills up with guys that bill by the hour. We need more people in real businesses that can also then serve an elected public office. And yeah, this is a very strong feeling of mine. It's why I put a lot of time and effort into this. And people ask me, why are you doing it? It's been strictly a labor of love. I have not taken in $1 in contributions. I've funded it all out of my own pocket. And out of these Idea Association meetings, which became the Idea Cafe eventually, spun out the Franklin circles that we do. I saw an article in Training Magazine, What We Know About How Adults Learn. I read the article. It mentioned what Franklin had done, and we tried it here in Denver, and I've been setting them up ever since. And it's an adult self-directed learning group. I took some classes at Regis University on adult learning theory and kind of kicked the tires of the model. And I'm a big believer that to be an autodidact where you're 100% independent is very, very difficult for most people. If you can do it, more power to you. But you might help others do the same thing. If you participate in one of those little groups, you might even learn more yourself. And Franklin's group had a very simple format, and that's what we share with people. And we're now starting to call these groups praxis. Praxis is a term that was really misunderstood by a previous pope. He suppressed it. Ronald Reagan suppressed it. And I think it really got a bad rap. It doesn't mean communism. It doesn't mean you're a follower of Karl Marx. It means that you really buy into the concept that two heads are better than one, that if we come together and reason together, that we can see a vision. We can, I believe, a higher power in whatever way you want to understand God works through those sorts of little groups. Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And there's all kinds of examples of that. So what we do now at the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop is it's also a praxis incubator. If you come, we'll try to help connect you to like-minded learners and start a Franklin Circle or whatever you want to call it. And if you come to just one meeting and go out and prosper, then more power to you. It's free. It's open to everyone. I do one here in Denver as kind of a model. We encourage people to come to that, then maybe lead it, and then go start one. And we'll help you with all three steps. Now, to help get you to the first one, that's what I'm doing right now. It's at 2 p.m. Panera Bread Cafe, 13th and Grant, just a block from the Capitol. It's from 2 to 3:30. It's very informal. And come and give it a try. I think you'll find it's very helpful. And right after, for anybody that's interested, stick around and we have this praxis incubator. We'll be doing the first one this afternoon, but we just talk with people about, what is it that you're wanting to learn about? What could you do to find people like that? How can we help? So that is every Friday afternoon, 2 p.m. At Panera Bread, 13th and Grant. If you're taking a trip to the beautiful Rocky Mountains, stop in Denver Friday afternoon, go to this, talk to your tax attorney about this, but there might be a way to help make your trip tax deductible if you add that in. I know TAB, one of the reasons they're headquartered, the Alternative Board in Aspen, is that's what they do. They encourage people to come and vacation in Aspen and participate in TAB. Well, this is only 90 minutes, and come maybe on your way back. The next week we'll give you a chance to lead it. But if you participate in one, you lead one, we will help you start one. And that's really what it boils down to. Now, to participate in one, it may be coming here to Denver, or you might want me to come to where you are, and I'm glad to do that. If we combine it with talks at various service clubs, local colleges, business classes, things like that, maybe we can help you attract a crowd for whatever it is you have in mind that you want to learn. Now, one focus is startup. That's the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop, sort of like the business division. But there are all kinds of other things other than business to learn about. And some of these praxis will have a strictly spiritual focus. Think of it as a Bible study. People getting together. And InterVarsity Christian Fellowship has a Bible study that is very much in the tradition of what Ben Franklin did. And I love their format for a Bible study. So each one will be totally autonomous, independent, except if they hold themselves out as an Idea Cafe. If we'll have directories and things like this eventually, then they'll have to meet certain standards. We're not going to go out with a clipboard and inspect people, but it'll be voluntary standards so people will know what to expect. And if you would like to participate in that, we would love to have you join us. And again, the best way to do that is to just show up at one of our meetings. Right now, here in Denver, Friday afternoons at 2 p.m., Panera Bread, 13th and Grant. We'll be there this afternoon and next Friday. Now, if you've got questions and want to talk with me more before you make up your mind whether to come to Denver, give me a call, 303-861-1447. That's 303-861-1447. Now, the announcement we're going to make, I started doing this Small Business Chamber of Commerce, which is going to continue. It's a Colorado nonprofit corporation, and it may actually be the parent corporation. But the name that we're going to hold out, I believe, we're just going to test this. I'm going to talk about it at the Idea Cafe this afternoon. I'm kind of tiptoeing into this a little bit. But we're going to call it wrencollege.org. And that's what we're going to be calling this entity that will help people form these self-directed learning groups. And we're going to hold ourselves out as someone that will help people who would like to teach in their own local neighborhood. You know, we have community colleges. Why not hyper-local neighborhood colleges? And I'm calling this Wren College. Maybe you call yours Joe Smith College. Whatever you call it is up to you. And unless you want to hold it out as part of Wren College, then it would have to meet, you know, we'll have certain agreements, traditions, that type of thing that we all conform to. Those aren't in place yet, but they will be. And, you know, I have a brother who gets very concerned that I'm trying to like put one over on people. I mean, I really am kind of a one-man band right now. I've had a lot of really good people help me with this, from David Pallison and Norman Pesser. Norman just passed away, a CPA that helped me a lot. A lot of these people were in the dedication to my little book on startup that I wrote back in 1994. But even more recently, Russell, Corky, you know, Nathan, Eugene, although he's never come to a meeting, he sees it happening there at Panera because of the Socrates Cafe we do Friday nights. Now, the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop will continue, and that's sort of the business division of Wren College, is one way of looking at this, not from a legal point of view, but just as far as how we're going to be holding ourselves out. And Socrates Cafe is more the liberal arts side of things, is one way to think about it. Liberal in the sense of Farid Zakaria has just written a book about liberal education. And Rebecca Chop, the chancellor at AU, is probably the #1 person in America today, a college president, talking about the value of a liberal education. Now, they don't mean that in the sense that it's used in political circles, conservative versus liberal. They've really just destroyed the use of the term liberal. But the Socrates Cafe helps people observe, reflect. Idea Cafe Startup Workshop helps translate those reflections into action. It turns ideas into action. And that's very much what happens in universities. There's the business school, which the good ones are concerned, just like a school of medicine. They're not there for theoretical research. They do theoretical research, but it's practical applications. It's not like a chemistry professor who's just doing research for its own sake, which is great. And then people see things they never would have seen. If you only had practical people doing exclusively practical things, a lot of the world as we know it today would not exist. And a lot of people don't understand this. They say, oh yeah, I just got an email that I answered, and sort of the things I'm saying right now. Said, oh yeah, the burger flippers, they've taken that class in literature. Well, that's not true. If you look at the successful people in the world, a lot of them, that's the education they had, especially as an undergraduate. You know, they got a BA, a bachelor's degree. Maybe they came back and got an MBA. eventually. But that foundation was how to think. And that's one of the reasons I think there's a real need for Wren College. We're going to call it the Wren College of True Self-Directed Learning. True because it's your true self. It's not some sort of, one way of thinking about this is it's a way to translate the inspiration, and the root word of that is spirit. This higher power comes through us. We get an inspiration. It's trying to help people make that dream into a reality is what we're really trying to do. But you can't make that dream into a reality unless you first have the dream. And the kind of education that happens in the liberal arts college helps that tremendously. I got the great privilege of spending 2 years of my life at a small liberal arts college in Iowa. And then fell in love, and we got married. They didn't allow married students back then, if you can believe that. It just seems like unimaginable. But, they may have had a good idea. It wouldn't be a bad idea if I'd focused on learning for a couple more years. And I'm sure I would have taken a whole different path, although I'm also pretty sure, well, I don't want to take more credit than I deserve, but I worked in my dad's business, and he had not adjusted sales for inflation, and it was kind of throwing cold water on the thing, but he saw that he needed to sell, and he'd been thinking about it for a couple of years prior to that, and I'd been against it until I was there with him, and I saw exactly what was happening, and margins were shrinking. The large chain stores were impossible to work with. They wanted to squeeze him out because he was so good for the little independent grocer who they were trying to squeeze out of business. They would deny that, but that's absolutely the truth. And so we were able to sell for a good price, and I think it was very helpful to my dad, except for this aspect of retirement. And I guess why I do what I'm doing is for the benefit of somebody like my dad, that instead of going buying welding supplies and metal, come to one of these Idea Cafe startup workshops, because we get inspired in one of two ways. There's the consolation that we have of being directed by a higher power that's benevolent and loving and wants the best. But then there's that other. It's the two wolves fighting, the good wolf and the bad wolf. They fight in each one of our heads. Old Indian told his grandson about that, and the grandson says, well, grandfather, which dog wins? These two dogs fighting in our head, the good dog and the bad dog. Which one wins? I know that fight. Who? And the grandfather says, well, grandson, the dog that we feed. And I think that's what liberal arts education does in its best form, is it feeds the good dog. And that is then something we can take into the rest of our life. Maybe we come back to graduate business school, or maybe we just become this autodidact that can learn perfectly well on their own. And even the liberal arts education, some people get that on their own. I'd like to know more about Bill Gates. Was he really just a computer nerd, or did he have other interests that helped form him? Well, we're coming up to the end of the hour, half hour that we spend here each Friday morning. We're going to be doing interviews with people. You just have to be in front of the webcam in your office, and we'll get connected and then broadcast to the world together. So if you have a message that would be helpful to people that we're trying to get to tune into the show, we'd love to have you on. If you've got a book, send it to me. And if you send me the book, I'll get right back to you, and we'll get you on the show for sure, if it's a book that I think people might like to know about. And starting in the next week or two, we'll have a guest each week to share the airtime. If you'd like that to be you, I'd love to talk to you about it. Also talk to you about the Idea Cafe Startup Workshop in cooperation with your local Chamber of Commerce. How maybe we could help you get that started, or just visit us here in Denver, 2 o'clock every Friday afternoon. If you want to stay for the Socrates Cafe, that's at 6 o'clock at Panera Bread, 13th and Grant. It's free and open to everybody, and it's a free-for-all, very unstructured. There are other versions. I lead one Saturday evenings at 6:30 at the University of Denver Anderson Academic Commons, which used to be called the Penrose Library. It's right there on Evans, about halfway between University and, I guess, High Street. It's on the north side of the campus, but it's a huge building. You can't miss it. Anderson Academic Commons. We're over by current periodicals. And we just take up whatever topic somebody's got on their mind. The group decides, we pick the topic. Whoever brought the topic speaks to it first. So come ready to share a little bit about it. Then 2 or 3 other people are picked at random to share about the same topic. Then we take turns asking each other questions. And in an hour, it is a very stimulating experience and helps me be a better observer. I do it because I benefit from it. Same thing with Idea Cafe. I learned something every Friday afternoon. It's free and open to everybody. We just ask you to bring your startup experience and your ideas for the other people that are there, because you'll give them help at the same time you're getting helped. So that's the whole idea of praxis. I'm more and more looking through this praxis lens. I've read Chancellor Chop's book, The Praxis of Suffering. I was even able to get a URL for that, which I would just give to her if she wants it. But I'm thinking that maybe praxis of suffering is, there are a lot of situations where a 12-step program does not exist for a particular situation. And we're thinking we can pull people together like that and have the 12 steps as a foundation, something they have in common. Maybe even job hunting. I see people that just struggle that shouldn't. They're bright, they're hardworking, they have lots of experience. They have a harder time. I'm just wondering if that's not a spiritual problem. So we're going to be trying to form a 12-step praxis type group for those sorts of people. And I'll be in it myself. I've struggled ever since I went through a very painful divorce. Well, the good thing about this format of show, we can run over a little bit, but I don't want to too much. If you'll email this to a friend, just link to this, email it out. I would really appreciate it, and especially anybody you think would be a good guest on the show. And call me anytime. Each Monday morning, 9:30 or so is a good time to call. Our number is 303-861-1447. That's 303-861-1447. Sponsored by the Small Business Chamber of Commerce, Inc. We'd like to help you do more good work. Remember, this life is very short, so let's go get started.